Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, and welcome to Readings with Regina. We are in the month of December. December is a very special month. It was a very special month to our ancestors, thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago. Oh, yes, because December 21st was the first day of the winter solstice. We have shorter days, longer nights. Many animals hibernate during that time period. And check this out, December 1st, 4 days after December 1st, the earth moved a little closer to the sun because the sun is far away. That's why winter is a season. But 4 days later, December 25th, the sun, S-U-N, is reborn. Isn't that interesting? This is what our ancestors celebrated thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years ago. And of course, I'm talking about the ancient Africans, the ancient Kemetic people. Yes, hello. All right, folks, we're going to get right into the books today. And I have to warn you, it's going to be horrible. But I'm also going to show you how to release, how to disappear. Well, maybe not disappear, but how to weaken the horrible. You see, our history in this country is terrible. This is why they keep it out of schools. They don't want Black people walking around mad all the time, ready for revolution, like we were in the 1960s. Yes. But it's important, as I always say, for you to know the truth about your history, our history. And I venture to say that few people are really going to teach it to you, especially in mainstream schools. All right? So I'm reading from The Slave Ship. And if you remember from Tuesday's reading, it was pretty rough. But once again, I'm going to show you how to release the roughness, how to release the stress of learning about these very true things that happen to our people. It's important, especially if you are of African descent. Well, most of us are. I mean, Africans were the first people. But I mean the obvious African descendant people. We have to know how terrible it was for us to be brought over here. Yes, it was a ma'afa, a Holocaust. Marimba Ani, she named it ma'afa. It is our horror story. You might want to look that name up, Marimba Ani, and get her book, Yorugu. I'll make a copy of it for you, a picture of it for next show. All right, now, we left off on Tuesday. There was a very despondent brother. He wouldn't eat, right? And he tried to kill himself by tearing out the jugular vein in his neck. I'm going to pick up on that right now. Trotter, that's the doctor. All of these slave ships had doctors on them. They had other professional people on them too, but they always had a doctor on them. Trotter stitched up the wound and apparently considered force feeding the man. The man stopped eating too. He didn't want no food. The throat wound, however, quote, put it out of our power to use any compulsory means, end of quote, which were, of course, common on slavers. He referred to the speculum oris, the long, thin mechanical contraption used to force open unwilling throats to receive gruel and hence sustenance. The following night, the man made a second attempt on his own life. He tore out the sutures. The doctor had obviously stitched him. He tore them out and cut his throat on the other side. Summoned to handle a new emergency, Trotter was cleaning up the bloody wound when the man began to talk to him. He declared simply and straightforwardly that, quote, he would never go with white men, end of quote. He then, quote, looked wistfully at the skies. Looked at the skies. He looked at the skies. I want you all to think about that. And he uttered several sentences Trotter could not understand. So he looked at the sky, and then he spoke in his own African language because this brother knew he had a connection to the sky. He had decided for death over slavery. He had decided for death over slavery. The young doctor tended to him as best he could and ordered a, quote, diligent search, end of quote, of the apartment of the enslaved men for the instrument he had used to cut his throat. The sailors found nothing. Looking more closely at the man and finding blood on his fingertips and ragged edges around the wound, Trotter concluded that he had ripped open his throat with his own fingernails. Yet the man survived. His hands were secured, quote, to prevent any further attempt, end of quote. But all the efforts came to naught against the will of the nameless man. Trotter later explained that, quote, he still, however, adhered to his resolution, refused all sustenance, and died in about a week or 10 days afterwards of mere want of food, end of quote. The captain of the ship had also been informed of the situation. Captain Clement Noble said the man, quote, stormed and made a great noise, worked with his hands, and threw himself about in an extraordinary manner and showed every sign of being mad, end of quote. When Thomas Trotter told the man's story in 1790 to a parliamentary committee investigating the slave trade, it set off a flurry of questions and indeed something of a debate. Members of Parliament with pro-slavery sentiments sided with Captain Noble and tried to discredit Trotter, denying that willful suicide resistance could be the moral of the story, while anti-slavery MPs supported Trotter and attacked Noble. An MP asked Trotter, quote, do you suppose that the man who attempted to cut his throat with his nails was insane? End of quote. Of this, Trotter had no doubt. He answered, quote, by no means insane. I believe a degree of delirium might have come on before he perished, but at the time when he came on board, I believe that he was perfectly in his senses, end of quote. The man's decision to use his own fingernails to rip open his throat was an entirely rational response to landing on a slave ship. And now the most powerful people in the world were debating the meaning of his resistance. Understand that this brother taking his own life, and I don't even like to think about him tearing out his jugular vein, okay, with his fingers. This, my brothers and sisters, is how horrific slavery was. And what did the white folks do? Oh, they had a debate in Parliament. Okay? And the captain said, well, he was just a crazy dude. No! He hated slavery. Just like the sister who jumped up that I told you about on Tuesday. Jumped up on the ship. Fell down. And died. Slavery was horrific. You hear me, people? And I know a lot of people, politicians, professional people, they don't want to talk about it. Oh, it was so long ago. Oh. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago. And check this out. Brother Love, who took his life like that, ugh, he looked up at the sky. He knew where he came from. Do you know where you came from? I mean, where were you in 1769, 1789? Boom. Look at my banner. Why are you here? What is this life all about? Huh? I'll talk more about that later. Let me get to the next book. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. You know I love this book. Why? Because it is actually written by an enslaved female. And if you choose to, you can compare Linda Brent with Frederick Douglass. Remember we read him? All right. You can compare a female slave narrative to a male slave narrative. And always remember, I say this a lot, but I want to say it again. Boom! I want you to share these videos with your children. I want you to share my lessons with your children. Now you can decide which ones are, more appropriate than others. I mean, it might be kind of rough talking about, the man tearing out his neck. I don't know. You decide. But if you have teenagers, share my work with them. Talk about these things. Talk about other events that are going on. All right, let me stop. And let me go to Linda now. Linda Brent. Nat Turner's rebellion has taken place, you dig? So white folks all over are terrified. Yes, because they know what they did to black people. See? And Nat Turner was on the move. And Nat Turner's army was building and building as he went from plantation to plantation. So they were scared. But in any event, miles and miles and miles away from the Nat Turner rebellion, white folks went crazy. Especially the low whites, what Linda Brent calls the low whites. These are the poor whites. They got a chance to hunt some N-words, yo, and get away with pillaging their homes, stealing their food, stealing their clothing. Okay? So I'm continuing with that rampage through her town. Linda Brent. The better class of the community exerted their influence to save the innocent, persecuted people. Now, who's the better class of the community? White folks. White folks are the better class of the community. They exerted their effort, yes, they did, to save the innocent, persecuted people. And in several instances, they succeeded by keeping them shut up in jail till all the excitement abated. These white folks were tearing apart people's living quarters. And in order to protect some of the Negroes, white people put them in jail. Okay? And I told you on Tuesday, some of the black women ran into the forests, into the swamps. Yes, because they knew the kind of terror that white folks was going to impart on them, and they could do it with impunity. They were never punished. Nobody locked them suckers up. They locked up black people to save them. Okay. At last, the white citizens found their own property was not safe from the lawless rabble they had summoned to protect them. They rallied the drunken swarm, drove them back into the country, and set a guard over the town. The next day, the town patrols, that's the origins of the police, the town patrols were commissioned to search colored people that lived out of the city. And the most shocking outrages were committed with perfect impunity. Every day for a fortnight, if I looked out, I saw horsemen with some poor, panting Negro, little n, Negro tied to their saddles and compelled by the lash to keep up with their speed, till they arrived at the jail yard. Those who had been whipped too unmercifully to walk were washed with brine, tossed into a cart, and carried to jail. Now, let me tell you what brine is. Brine is like a vinegar. Now, you're already whipped, so you already have lacerations on you. So then they throw brine on you. Can you imagine how that stung our ancestors? They too were carried to jail. One black man who had not fortitude to endure scourging promised to give information about the conspiracy, but it turned out that he knew nothing at all. He had not even heard the name of Nat Turner. The poor fellow had, however, made up a story which augmented his own sufferings and those of the colored people. The day patrol continued for some weeks, and at sundown, a night guard was substituted. Nothing at all was proved against the colored people, bond or free. The wrath of the slaveholders was somewhat appeased by the capture of Nat Turner. The imprisoned were released, the slaves were sent to their masters, and the free were permitted to return to their ravaged homes. Visiting was strictly forbidden on the plantations. The slaves begged the privilege of again meeting at their little church in the woods with their burying ground around it. It was built by the colored people, and they had no higher happiness than to meet there and sing hymns together and pour out their hearts in spontaneous prayer. Their request to attend the white churches, their request was denied, and their church was demolished. The white folks tore down the colored people's church. The enslaved people had built a little church. White people burned it down. White people did not want blacks to get together, black on black, at all, because white people feared another rebellion because they knew how horrific they were and are, not are, they were treating black people, be they slave or free. All right. The blacks were permitted to attend the white churches. Now they burnt down the black church. Lord, this isn't funny. I have to laugh. Okay, they burned down the black church, but they were permitted to attend the white churches, a certain portion of the galleries being appropriated to their use. There, when everybody else had partaken of the communion and the benediction had been pronounced, the minister said, quote, "Come down now, my colored friends," end of quote. They obeyed the summons and partook of the bread and wine in commemoration of the meek and lowly Jesus, who said, quote, "God is your Father, and all ye are brethren," end of quote. Okay, so here we go. If one black man or group of them rebelled, other black people suffered. Do keep that in mind, because there were groups of black people who would get together slyly and discuss rebellions. This, though, is what happened to enslaved people who rebelled. Their rebellion would be, taken out by the whites. They would punish other black, or at the time, Negro people. Okay? This episode is called Aboard the Slave Ship. You already heard that. Self-death of the body, a release of spirit, haunting the Negro and whites. I say that because slavery is still haunting us today. I absolutely believe that for the blacks and the whites. Okay, here we go. Next book, Ida B. Wells. Y'all know her. Now, you know, Ida B. was a very, very moral woman. Okay? And she was working for a newspaper. Let me get rid of this. She's working for a newspaper. And she had written an article that complained about the color schools. First of all, the buildings were not up to speed. Worse than that, in Ida B. Wells's mind, some of the teachers were getting their positions not from their great knowledge of teaching, oh no, but from sleeping with white men. Dig. You slept with a white man, you could get a job teaching Negro children. Here we go. Okay, I spent the summer. Oops, I'm on the wrong page. Hold tight. All right. It is an interesting sidelight on some of the conditions which obtained in the South at that time. But this beautiful young girl, she's talking about a young girl who got a job as a teacher, and the chick could not teach, was not a real teacher, but she had a white boyfriend who sat on the school board. It is interesting sidelight on some of the conditions which obtained in the South at that time. But this beautiful young girl carried on her clandestine love affair with this young white man, growing bolder as time went on. One Sunday morning, she came to her sister's home after having been out all night and was charged by her brother-in-law with immoral practice. In the bitter scene that which ensued, he called her some hard names. See, Ida B. Wells, just like Linda Brent, they don't tell you the actual names that are terrible. Okay? They don't curse, they have a certain decorum about what they share in literature. Anyway, this girl, this teacher who got a job, who she had a boyfriend who was white, and he was on the school board. In the bitter scene which ensued, he called her some hard names. You can kind of imagine the names. This is going to shock you. Ready to be shocked? She ran to her room, snatched a pistol out of her trunk, rammed it as far into her ear as it would go, and blew her brains out. It was significant to look at the floral pieces that were sent to her funeral. The largest and finest had the name of her admirer boldly attached to it. People, I want to just say this. I'm going to give some slack. You never know here. This white dude might have really loved this black woman, and she might have really loved him. But how in the world are you going to... They couldn't marry. They couldn't live together legally. He would lose whatever status he had. He would lose it with a black woman. Okay? And morality. I really want you all to think about that. 19th century morality, early 20th century, 19th, it meant everything. You didn't just sleep around. Understand, that started later in the 1960s. As I get closer to that period, I'll talk more about it. But this poor girl killed herself. Do you understand that? Because she was found out having an affair with a white guy. And she had a job as a teacher, and she was not qualified to teach. That was enough for her to kill herself. All right, I'll proceed. That year, when the time came for election of teachers, the school board failed to re-elect me as it had done every year for 7 years. I was not even notified of this until time for the school to be open. Too late to seek employment elsewhere, I sent my lawyer to the Board of Education to find out why. The reply was that no fault was found with my ability as a teacher, or with my character. But the board had a copy of the free speech on file in the office showing criticism of them. They didn't care to employ a teacher who had done this, and for that reason, I had been left out. Of course, I had rather feared that might be the result, but I had taken a chance in the interest of the children of our race and had lost out. The worst part of the experience was the lack of appreciation shown by the parents. They simply couldn't understand why I would risk a good job, even for their children. The burden of their simple refrain was, quote, Miss Ida, you ought not have done it. You might have known that they would fire you, end of quote. But I thought it was right to strike a blow against a glaring evil, and I did not regret it. Up to that time, I had felt that any fight made in the interest of my race would have its support. I learned then that I could not always count on that. Now, you all can mull over whether or not you think Ida B. Wells was right to write what she did about the public school teachers, the teachers of colored children. But I do want you to keep in mind, like I said before, the high ideals that Ida B. Wells and other Black women had about your moral character. You did not sleep around. No. I'm sure some people snuck and did it, but nevertheless, morality meant a great deal. Okay, let's go to our hero. Asada. Asada. I know that some of you people who listen to me don't think Asada is a hero, but most of you do. But let me just say to those of you who may not understand this, Asada is a hero to Black people. I don't care what the new CIA director says about her. Our heroes are different from white heroes. We are a different people from white American people. White American people owned us for over 300 years. Okay? And nothing has really been quelled. There was no recompense for our misery. Okay, let me get to Asada. Where am I? Oh, she's now in the 5th grade. In the 5th grade, I was put into the class of the school's most notorious battle axe, Mrs. Hoffler. I knew from the first day it was going to be a long, hot year. The only good thing was that there was another Black kid in the class. The teacher put us in the back next to each other. His name was David something, but I called him David Pecan. The teacher was one of those military types, and her classes resembled boot camp. We were told where to sit, how to sit, and what kind of notebooks, pens, pencils, etc. to use. She permitted no talking and gave tons of homework. Her punishment for everything was extra homework. Whenever somebody got caught talking or doing anything she disapproved of, she gave extra homework. When you didn't have your homework, she gave extra homework. And every time she gave you extra homework, she wrote your name on the blackboard and refused to remove it until you had turned in the punishment. By the time I left her class, my name covered practically the entire blackboard. David and I were her favorite targets. The whole class would be in an uproar, but we were the only ones she saw with our mouths open. The more she wrote our backs, the more rebellious I became. I would sit in the back of the class and make jokes about her. One day when we were talking and giggling, she came up and pulled David out of his seat by the ear, twisting it until the whole side of his face was red and contorted with pain. I made up my mind right then and there she was not going to do that to me. A few days later, she came after me. When she put her hands on me, I kicked her or hit her. I don't remember which. Anyway, the next thing I knew, I was in the principal's office being sent home with a note. I was scared to death my mother would find out, so I signed the note myself and brought it to school the next day. My signature didn't fool anybody. To make a long story short, When my mother found out, I confessed everything and I told her about Mrs. Hoffler. I think she had some idea about what was going on because she had seen a change in me. I had always been very quiet and obedient in school. My mother went to the school, talked to the teacher and the principal, and demanded I be moved to another class. It's a good thing that she wasn't one of those parents who believe the teacher is always right, because I don't know what would have happened. I guess the fact that she's a teacher and is acutely aware of the racism and hostility that Black children are exposed to from the time they enter school had something to do with it. Okay, I think I'm going to stop. No, I want to read this to you too. I don't remember the name of my other fifth grade teacher, except that it was a mile long and began with a Z. But she was very nice and a very good teacher. She introduced us to art, literature, and philosophy. I remember studying the French Revolution in her class. She made names like Marie Antoinette, Charlotte Corday, and Robespierre come alive. She talked about philosophers like Rousseau, who influenced the thinking of the period, and about how the French Revolution was influenced by the American Revolution. She even showed us pictures of the art and architecture of the period. She was the first teacher, one of a very few, who taught subjects that related to each other. This is very important, people, especially if you have children. Before I was in her class, I would never have imagined that history was connected to art, that philosophy was connected to science, and so on. How do you like that? Yes, this is why I always talk to you about teaching at home. Take your children to museums, even white museums. Know the history of your country, and then you can relate it through a lens that is Black that your children will understand. All right, people, I'm about to sign off, but I do want to read. I don't know if this comes through. Julia Wright's book for the baby ancestors in Gaza. I just adore what Julia does with poetry because she is cataloging what is going on today in Palestine. And I'll also, this particular poem touches my heart. In fact, I might even dedicate, along with others, Aaron Bushnell. I might even dedicate him in my next book that I'm thinking about right now. This is called Aaron Bushnell's Love Supreme. The passers-by guessed what you were going to do. The onlookers saw your anti-genocidal intent and let you go ahead. And now you are dead. You were allowed to burn a long, excruciating time before just a few rushed to your rescue shouting, "Call the board!" YouTube hastened to blur the image, but could not delete in our minds the genocide you died for. This white boy poured gasoline on himself and lit a match. YouTube hastened to blur the image, but could not delete in our minds the genocide you died for. May you rest in Palestine. And I will add, Aaron Bushnell, may you rest in peace. Yes, just like the brother aboard the slave ship, may he rest in paradise, who took his own life with his own hands because slavery was just that terrible. All right, people, remember that this is December. The winter solstice is December 21st. Animals will start to hibernate. You need to think about your own self hibernation. Absolutely. This is a special time period. I want you to be, let me see what the sister says. I want you to be attuned to your atmosphere. So, how you doing, love? Wow. The one, yes, the one who set himself on fire. Yes. Okay. He got, and he was a serviceman. See, we talking about a serviceman here. All right. A veteran. Okay? War is terrible. I'm going to get off in just a minute, but war is terrible. And when you look at how this country is now killing those poor fishermen, okay, from in Venezuelan waters, understand what they doing. Understand how they getting away with legal murder. I suggest that you talk to your political people. All right? War is horrific on the people who fight it. And before I sign off, let me just say this. Rich people's children don't go to war. It is the poor who go to war. Always know that, people. The people who make wars, their family don't go to war. Your family will. All right. I did tell you I was going to teach you how to release some of the stress. I'm going way over. I don't want to do that. But I want to say this. Meditate. Go inward. Go to God. You don't have to be on your knee. However you want to pray. However you get to God, get to God. Sit in stillness. Take the stress with you so that the force inside of you and outside of you can at least nullify or at least mollify or at least weaken the horror that you felt in your body. All right. I'll talk more about that next Tuesday. Beloved, I love you. I do this because I love you. Notice it's no advertisements here. I don't ask you for no money. I don't ask you for anything. But I do want you to really start thinking about teaching your children and other people's children if you don't have any. We need that extra learning. All right, folks. I'm going to sign off for real this time. Take good care, and I love you dearly. You know I pray for you every night and every day. Peace.